Outrider biker squads. I ride across the plains of a world that has not felt the presence of the Imperium for over 5,000 years. Everything has changed. Not just in me, but in the whole of Ultramar, if not the entire Imperium. At least I pray it has. For there is no feeling like this. Nothing that compared to it. Purpose. The long years are over. The mourning of the Imperium for its shattered soul, its broken king, its lost leaders, lost lights. Everything has changed. For he has returned. And with him, he has brought that one thing we all lacked. Hope. I ride across the plains of a world that has not felt the presence of the Imperium for over 5,000 years. And that is the thing, that one statement, is the proof of my assertions. For I remember how it was before he returned. For I am an ultramarine of good standing, long service. I've paid my dues, played my part, strove mightily for the Imperium, and for beloved Ultramar. Long did I serve in the times before. We were proud of our achievements, the glories we had accrued, the sectors we had saved, the enemies we had bested. But we always knew it would only be a matter of time. Deep down we knew. Ultramar, the jewel in the Imperium's crown, center of martial excellence, discipline and order. We had survived through all of the 10 millennia of the Imperium. We had been a shining beacon to others, of the Imperium, to the Astartes. We were the Ultramarines, and we were undefeated. But deep down, there was always a sadness. Our Primarch, the avenging son, Robut Giddeman, was held in stasis in the midst of his last seconds, forever a shrine and example, but also a deep wound at the heart of our entire culture. For we mourned him. We mourned him so bitterly. And every day we saw his shrine, and were filled with pride, with determination to live up to his example. But we needed him so much, we would not let him die. We needed to believe. We needed it. So we clung to his memory, the hopelessly infantile dream that he would someday arise to protect us, to lead us, to make us complete again. And it looked so hopeless. The hordes of the greenskins only light years away from us, really. The emerging metallic menace that raids and disappears again. The Tyranids. Our list of enemies became so long that none but an Ordo Xenos or Deathwatch would be able to recite even 100th of their number. Beset on all sides, it looked like only a matter of time. It was impossible to see the truth, to even identify the feeling, until we were able to experience something else, something so much better. But I will not wax on in ephemera. Let us make this grounded. I crossed the plains of a world that has not felt the presence of the Imperium for over 5,000 years. The latter I shall deal with first, for I must explain. There have always been crusades, I've been told, all throughout the span of the Imperium. But they have been short things, small things, localized things. And most often they have been crusades of reclamation. But in regions that have only just been lost, only just been swallowed by hate-filled covens of witches, or more often Xenos in their multitudes. We have struck back, but our returns have always been less than they were before. Like a tide going out, our waves have always been diminishing, not expanding. And the Imperium has been slowly eroded. But now, I am on a planet that has not been visited, not been considered to be within the realms or the reach of the Imperium for 5,000 years. This is a push not to take back, but to expand. The former now. I ride across the plains, my bike beneath me. Hammerstrike and Stormstrike speeders dart across the landscape above. The central push is made up of hovering transports in their tens, repulsors, impulsors, Astraeus. They are all there. We are acting as the Outrider squads on the flanks. Where before there would have been 4 more bikes with me, now there are only 2. For we are a triplicity, not a quintuple. But we are no weaker for the lack of those 2 brothers. For as I said, things have changed. I was a firstborn Marine and Astartes. I fought in the bike squads. I was born to the saddle, said my tutors, and so there I stayed. But the feeling was different to this. Before, we would be a reactionary force, striking hard, striking fast, as is the Space Marine way. But it felt like firefighting, because that is all we ever did. We reacted. We stopped, held back, cut off, beheaded, and defeated one foe after another. But we were run ragged, constantly poorly supplied and outnumbered to a dangerous degree. And we had to fight in a way that was consummate with those threats. We would calculate the vectors to minimize losses, as we do now, but there were situations where we would have to bombard and destroy instead of reclaiming, as the cost would have been too high. It felt like we were always on the back foot, because we were. I ride across the plains towards my foe. But now, it is not as a dashing hero about to arrive in the nick of time, before then redeploying in a panic. No. Now I ride with my brothers toward the enemy unafraid, of course, but unconcerned as well. For I know we have the forces to beat them, no matter what they do, what they summon, what they throw at us. I ride now as a hunter, as a knight in shining armor, as a warrior of the Imperium triumphant again. For he has returned. The avenging sun has returned. I mentioned I was an Astartes, but when Marneus Calgar, Emperor watch over him, crossed what was dubbed the Rubicon Primaris, and became one of that new type of Marine, well, when we were brutally injured, we Ultramarines now had a new choice. Before, it was just internment in a dreadnought, if one was available. But now there is the throw of the dice. The transformation from Astartes to Primaris. But it is a risk. For half of our number who have attempted it did not survive. But those that did, like me, the difference is staggering. I am faster, stronger, more resilient now. And bigger. I now ride on my heavy Primaris bike, every bit as fast and nimble as my old Astartes bike. But it has bolt rifles, not bolters. We gun our engines as we approach their ranks. So many of them, walking forward in lockstep, utterly unified. Metallic monsters as far as the eye can see. Before, we would have dug in or outflanked, or done any of 100 clever tricks. Now, we have calculated the best, most efficient way to defeat them, and it is a direct strike. And now, we have the confidence to perform it. Shots erupt from our lines as we advance. The repulsors and executioners strike out, and plumes of fire and plasma erupt amidst the ranks of the Necrons. But onward they march. Their heavy support now open up and retort, beaming hundreds more warriors out of nowhere, their green spectral rays slaying near anything they touch. But no battle should revolve around the attempt to lose no men or assets at all. For if you try to defend or protect everyone and everything, you end up protecting nothing. So we ride forward, To my flanks are the two brothers of my squad. Good men, but young men. I am the sergeant, of course. They always follow my lead, but they do it with all the skill and efficiency of any ultramarine born of McCragg. I have come to respect them. We fire as one, and the ranks of enemies explode. The punch of the bolt rifles more than that of even Holy Bolter. We rake them down across the front, as other Outrider squads are to our left and right. The main van of our army strikes theirs, and all hell breaks loose. The speeders crisscross the air, hunting their own swift units. Green blasts strike armor, and some crumble in the seat of their bikes. But not enough. We hit them, and our guns continue to mulch all before us on auto-fire, as we all draw our chainswords at the very last second and tear around us. We hit them so hard and so fast that they are unable to fire at us. So many of their own are in betwixt us and them before we strike them with sword or heavy pistol. And in no time, we are out the other side of their block. We turn and look for the heaviest concentration of resistance, then dive back into the blocks of Necrons right there. For in this zone must be the leaders of these automata, for they must have tech priest equivalents to motivate these robotic beings. So we ride back in, chainswords flaying around us. This time, we shall find their lords and take their heads. I take a single second to view the rest of the battlefield, and we Ultramarines smash the foe all across the line. I feel like a drop of water in a tsunami. I feel like a pebble in a landslide. I feel like a warrior of the Imperium triumphant. And now, there is nothing this galaxy can throw at us that is beyond our skill, nothing beyond our ability. For now, we have hope. For he has returned. The avenging sun has returned. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldmort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and units of the Warhammer 40k universe, the grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace, there is only time for war. And today, we are to discuss a swift yet sturdy unit that has not only the speed to get where it needs to be, but also the punch to make it worthwhile being there. Of course, I can only be speaking of the Outrider biker squads of the Adeptus Astartes, the Emperor's own Angels of Death, his Space Marines. Larger than the firstborn Astartes bikes out of necessity, as they carry a much larger rider. Yet they are also better armed, as they replace the sacred bolter, Holy Bolter, with a newly developed bolt rifle. With longer range and more punch, this can make all of the difference against more durable or sizable foes. And so, as usual, for the very basics, let us lean on existing wisdom. To quote, Outriders. Outriders are most commonly used to advance ahead of the main lines and to guard the flanks of larger formations. In battle, they perform lightning-fast hit-and-run attacks on enemy strongholds, and are employed to chase down any who would seek to escape. Are equipped with frontal bolt rifles, while they themselves wield Astartes chainswords and heavy bolt pistols. The performance of the bike is effective as long as the rider can dominate its bellicose machine spirit. End quote. A bit scant, the new codices in their write-ups, so you'll have to bear with me on that, it seems. I really did prefer it when they thought of the lore as seemingly much as the models, but that is the nature of being an old ghoul. Hindsight is often rose-tinted. Now the Outrider is an interesting unit. They themselves are not that important, nor is their rider really. Despite them being Primaris, the important issue is why they exist and how they are structured, organized, and deployed. Because they represent a total change in the forces of the Imperium, not in potency, although it is higher, there is no doubt, but in purpose. For these units, show a paradigm shift of staggering proportions, as do all of the Primaris. Not their increased size, endurance, resistance to the warp, or any genetic defects, or lack thereof, as debunked as those early claims of Belisarius core are. Twaddle, one would say. The Primaris Space Marine chapters are now structured as to be an aggressive force, not merely a defensive one. For the Space Marine chapters were indeed mighty, but they were not the equivalent of their ancient ancestors in the legions. For the Codex that was forced on all was a treatise that organized the remaining Marines into fast reaction response and defense forces. Of course they were able to attack, to strike fear into the hearts of their opponents, be they mutant, heretic, xenos, or witch. But let us not quibble, for their purpose had shifted from conquest to control, from glorious campaigns of reclamation to guardians of an Imperium beset on all sides. Not much has changed from that course in some 10,000 years or more, for they kept the Imperium of mankind alive, but forever shrinking. Of course, there would be crusades. Of course, there would be expansion efforts, but they were often mired in politics and stilted before they even really set off. Guilliman's reaction to the enshrining of the Codex was proof enough that it was never, ever intended to be permanent. It was a stopgap to structure the forces of the Imperium for the times that he saw, the issues he faced, straight after the Horus Heresy, while the Ultramarines were defending the Imperium all on their own practically, as the other legions performed the scouring. But those times are long, long gone. And now, upon his return, Reboot Guilliman waged his crusade to Terra, and then his Indomitus crusade. Initially at first, the system did not seem to shift fundamentally, for as the crusade liberated more worlds, bringing them back into the Imperial fold, he ceded many a chapter of Primaris Space Marines to secure a region. Yet in my mind at least, this is still not the same. The simple truth is that he was not seeding groups of defensive armies. No. He has left aggressive forces in a region that can be collected into larger forces to go on regional crusades. They are not a peacekeeping force, a defensive force at all, but many armies that are designed to wage war in a way that has not been seen since the Great Crusade. Expansive wars of aggression. The difference between a tactical squad and an intercessor is all the truth one needs. For the old squads of the Crusade assumed that there would be sufficient forces to permit specialist units to be brought to bear, should they be needed. Thus squads of battle line Marines were all of one weapon type, bolters, etc. And this is perfectly harkened back to in the new Primaris units, the intercessors, etc., because they too are generally armed with one type or model of weapon. So in reality, there are only two real options to deal with this change. Option 1. Reboot Guilliman, the Primarch of the Ultramarines, was so taken back when he returned from slumber, so lost in time, that he simply structured his men, his new forces, his Primaris, via the book the Principia Bellicosa. He went back to the ways his father had taught him out of instinct. A fall from confidence, perhaps, but then he was beset on all sides himself. Or option 2, either alone or when his brothers return. The Lord of Macragge is going back into the avenging business. And I, for one, do not know which is more terrifying. I have been Voldemort, your faithful servant. I hope you have enjoyed this brief introduction to Outrider bikes. If so, then please consider liking and subscribing. If you do, then hit the notifications button, as I would not want you to miss out. If you see the worth in what we are doing, then do please also consider joining our Patreon, or giving the video a share if that is beyond your present scope. It would be a great boon. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.